Good afternoon, everyone. This is your host, Chris, and I'm here with John,
Hi guys.
Darren,
Hello, everyone.
and Kimi.
Hi guys.
You're listening to the Current Events Podcast.
All right, so today is September 9th, 2021, which means that 4 days ago on the 5th, the official Tokyo Games have ended. So that's the Paralympics and the Olympics. And so, did you guys watch the Olympics on TV or anything?
Yeah, my dad actually got subscription, but I'm not too interested in sports.
So you didn't even see the opening or the closing ceremony?
Nope.
Not at all. To be honest, it wasn't that good. I gotta say, like it was pretty sad, but it's probably because of the COVID restrictions that they had, especially for the closing ceremony. That was so much worse than the opening because most of the athletes actually already left Japan by the time the closing ceremony was around because they had a rule that all the athletes had to leave within 48 hours, 2 days after their games ended. So, of course, the athletes participating in the beginning couldn't really stick around to be there for the closing ceremony. So, most of the people were actually just fully missing from the thing. I wonder if you guys, have any thoughts about that.
Really? Is it because the system is unprepared or something?
I don't know. That was just the way that they wanted to go about making the Tokyo Games. They had all of these regulations for the athletes and the people involved because they were definitely quite paranoid of the coronavirus spreading within the Olympic Village.
Yeah, I guess that's nice
So,
that they have
yeah,
precautions in place. Yeah.
yeah, it's
So,
definitely.
yeah, like the
Yeah, sorry.
Olympic Village, right? Like it's like a really big. I wouldn't say like massive city, right? But at least like a small, advanced, technologically advanced city, right? Like I heard like you can customize your own shoes, and then there's like what cardboard beds, right? I heard.
Cardboard beds, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. It was like,
yeah.
yeah, it's like yeah, everyone talks about the cardboard beds. Yeah, but I think the reason why they did the cardboard beds thing is because they wanted to be able to take down the place as quickly as possible. So they built it, and then there was this whole complex. But then after they leave, they just want to take it down. So they didn't
I mean,
actually
they're
have.
they're probably
Yeah,
saving money as well
Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
from building
Mm.
the stadium and stuff.
yeah. And they actually had the athletes, at least. I'm pretty sure the staff as well. They had to take COVID tests every single day. So swab test every single day. So it probably must have sucked really bad. But yeah, having to do a COVID test every single day to make sure that none of them were even close to getting infected. But yeah, I guess it didn't really stop people from getting infected though, because there were still a lot of people that got infected.
Were there
I believe.
athletes who got infected?
Yeah, there were actually a few, but definitely not as much athletes as the staff members. The staff members were definitely most of the cases relating to Olympic Games were managers, staff people, volunteers who worked at the places. But yeah, athletes did get COVID too.
So the numbers did rise after Olympics.
Yes,
Mm,
unfortunately. Yeah.
Definitely.
So I guess like how did they control like everything though? Like look, like if let's say on for example basketball team, right? There's like 11 to 12 players, right? Like what if one person comes into like contact and gets positive? What do they
Does
usually
that mean
do
they
to
just
handle
like
it?
shut the whole game down?
You mean like if they just get COVID, like they find out
Yeah, like
there,
one of their
like at the
teammates
game?
gets yeah.
I mean, I guess
Depends
if
on
they
how they got it.
test the other people, if they test like the teammates and they're negative, I'm pretty sure they're still allowed to play. But yeah, definitely the people who are positive, they get isolated and then they get sent home. So
And
yeah,
it also depends on how they got it. They can get banned or
Oh
true.
yeah, that's
more
another
Yeah,
point.
yeah.
Were
consequences.
the athletes allowed to like, I don't know, explore Japan or something? I wouldn't think so.
Yeah,
Definitely
they were
after their
not.
games, probably.
Yeah,
Definitely not during their games.
there were because of that rule, that 48 hours you have to go home thing. that rule was in place, obviously a lot of people were quite unhappy. Imagine being like an athlete, maybe from South America or like Africa, and it's like a once in a lifetime opportunity. You get to go to Japan to participate in the Olympics, and then you find out that you can't even see the city while you're there. You're just stuck in this place with cardboard beds, and then you have to go home 2 days after you finish. Yeah, it probably sucks. And
yeah,
yeah.
but I mean, like, I guess it's a new experience for everyone, you know, like, especially the Olympics, right? Every 4 years. And it was supposed to be in 2020, right? But they pushed it to 2021. So I guess really everything happening, you know, in like a small town, small city in the Olympic village. So I guess it's a really new experience for all the athletes, especially even for us at home as sort of the spectators. Like, we're not going to have the same feeling as actually sitting there and watching our favorite athletes represent our country and stuff like that. So yeah, I guess it's a really new experience all of us face, even as spectators.
Especially with the rules in place, very strict.
Yeah, very strict. Yeah.
And yeah, definitely the no spectators was probably the biggest, at least sports related thing that was like changed. Now team sports, big events like the sprints that used to have so many people watch and everyone is cheering is pretty much empty. And it is kind of unfortunate that people can't watch, people can't be out there and support. And yeah, at least compared to the Rio Olympics 5 years ago, that was always like, it was really festive and people were having fun partying after the games, and here it's just kind of depressing.
Yeah, so Darren, whatever you said, like, I really think it's really going to affect how the next few Olympics, like even other sporting events, like, you know, Wimbledon, US Open, all these other sporting events, like all over the world. Like, I have a question of how you think the Olympics would shape or sort of like model the future of sports events.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't just the like Olympics were pretty late in the COVID thing. In the very beginning, there were a lot of other sporting events that were happening during COVID. Yeah, like you mentioned, some of the tennis tournaments, like French Open, I'm pretty sure actually did it earlier that year. The Super Bowl in America, they also had they also had their thing, I think, at half capacity or something. But yeah, the biggest difference is that now with the Olympics, it's like global, right? There's like people from everywhere, and I guess definitely the Olympics were the most like, it was the hardest logistically to get everybody. So maybe going forward they'll find new ways, like new regulations, so it's not as strict, but at the same time keeping people safe. I don't know. Do you guys have any like ideas of what the regulations might be for future events?
I think there were obvious mistakes in the protocol, but overall, I think the Olympics can set sort of like a framework in which future events can be held, especially, as vaccinations roll out.
Yeah, so I think like with, you know, all these like vaccinations, swab tests, like special facilities, these like new sporting hosts have to sort of cater to all these athletes, especially like large sporting events like Olympics, right? Like, I feel that they're going to have to spend quite a lot more money, right? Like, especially with less and less spectators and more money that they have to spend. Like, I think they're going to be stuck in this sort of like economic struggle, I believe, in sometime soon. But I hope that doesn't happen anytime soon.
I mean, but it also depends on the COVID situation in the future, on how, if it's down already or people are still getting it, COVID situations are high. All depends on that.
Yeah.
True though. Like, I know this is kind of off topic, but do you guys think COVID's gonna last for like another year or 2 years, or is it gonna?
Oh, definitely.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think
Especially in Indonesia,
COVID.
definitely.
Yeah, like COVID.
Especially considering how countries don't actually make their citizens, it's not mandatory to get vaccinated. So disobedient country citizens like Indonesia,
Disobedient
some other parts of
citizens
the
not getting
some other
vaccinated.
parts of the world. There's always that one person that doesn't want to get vaccinated. So
Yeah.
natural, I guess.
Like, do
Or
you
at
guys,
least, yeah.
yeah,
Sorry.
like, do you guys think like COVID is gonna stick with us for like forever? You know what I mean?
Yes,
Like,
I think so. Like I think that people are just gonna end up thinking COVID's like the flu. It's like, oh, you got COVID or whatever.
yeah, like people are gonna
Yeah, just go
normalize.
home for
Yeah,
a while.
Yeah, the effects won't be as drastic as they are now, but yeah, it'll be around.
Yeah, but I guess going back to the Olympics or at least world global events where people from everywhere come around, I think they would start to require vaccinations because I'm pretty sure there were some people at the Tokyo Olympics that weren't vaccinated and like they just kind of came. So yeah, there was definitely problems like you said, and it could have been done a lot better, I would say, especially with how how people get around, and so that they're just not stuck there doing nothing in the Olympic Village and having to take swab tests every single day. It's like, yeah, like you said, it's really expensive too, and it wasn't profitable for Japan. Of course, with no spectators, no tourists who came to watch. Yeah, it just wasn't good economically either.
yeah. So that actually brings to quite a debatable question. Like, it's the like for the future of Olympics. Like, are countries gonna be willing to actually host the Olympics now? Now, when you speak of like, oh, Olympics are gonna get more expensive. People are not gonna come like fly over all the world just to come to your country to watch the Olympics. Like, what do you guys think about this?
People would still want to host the Olympics. I mean, it's very profitable. Well, obviously not now, but in the future, it will be as vaccinations keep on coming.
So
You
you
have to
think
build
that
infrastructure. The economy keeps rolling. People come in for tourism. It's been proven historically beneficial over 50 over the last 50 years to host the Olympics.
so it's just because COVID this year, I mean last
Yeah,
year
I
when
think so.
2020, yeah, was supposed to happen. That's
Yeah.
the only reason why it failed. And yeah, I can probably agree with that. Yeah.
Yeah. Building up on that, there's another dimension to the success of the Olympics, which is obviously economy and politics. There were some organizational controversies surrounding this current Olympics. I mean, there always has been, but in politics especially, it might have tarnished the reputation of the Olympics. What do you guys think about that?
Yeah, I heard there was like those officials who made the comments that got them fired. Is that really true?
Yeah. There was Yoshiro Mori. He was the former head of the organizing committee, and he was forced out after sexist comments. He said female board members, when they're speaking, they should have their times somewhat restricted. Otherwise, the meetings will, drag on.
That's what he said.
Yeah, that's what he said.
Yeah, what a guy. Yeah, and he got fired, right?
Yeah, well, yeah, he basically did. He was also the previous prime minister. Like, he was a previous prime minister. His run was marked by controversies.
And then someone thought it was a good idea to put him as the head of the Olympic committee.
Yep. I mean, it's all politics, I guess. An interesting dimension to the Olympics is that, the Olympics maintain this stance of political neutrality from the organization down to the athletes, right?
Yeah.
So the athletes weren't allowed to, do political demonstrations. But even in the context of the organization organizing itself and, doing its job, of course, there's going to be politics involved. So what do you think about that? Like, for example, Tsunekazu Takeda, he was the former JOC leader, and he resigned in 2018 due to former bribery allegations. As I've said before, it's very profitable. So these were done back in 2012. And he apparently bribed the Diak family, whose father is in charge of the IAAF. And eventually, Japan did get the hosting decision.
So wait, are you saying that Japan partially got the whole Olympics thing for them because they bribed? So one guy bribed this family.
Yeah,
much.
obviously Tsunekazu took the fall, but Japan did finally get its hosting
I mean,
opportunity.
yeah, it's interesting though because when you're hosting a global event and there's countries involved, like there's no way that politics can't be involved. Yeah, you can try to stay as neutral as you can, but there's really you can't just say they're a global event where countries and people come to represent their countries is just completely unpolitical.
True,
That
true,
doesn't really happen.
true.
I mean, they sort of got karma. They had it during COVID.
They
Mm.
had
Not
it
profitable.
True, though.
It reflected very badly on the international Olympic community by hosting the continuing, because you know the public reception, the political public reception of hosting the Olympics was negative by the Japanese, right? But
Yeah.
they went ahead with it anyway. So an interesting thing is Kaori Yamaguchi. She was the Japanese Olympic Committee executive. She said that the IOC operated like an entertainment business. I mean, it's not wrong though. Yeah.
Yeah, like
Wait, when you said that, wait, sorry.
it's okay. You go.
When you said that that the approval ratings were really low, was this before COVID hit? Like when they just found out the news, or were they saying we disapprove because COVID's a bad idea and they don't want
I'm pretty sure during COVID, no?
The public disapproved, and then Japanese Prime Minister Suga already had like super low ratings. He already had super low ratings, but he proceeded with the Olympics on national pride, political gain, and governments want their athletes to win the Olympics, right? So he thought it could boost it, but no. Now it's hit 31.8%. It's at an all-time low.
But this was before COVID, right?
No, this was after. So before it was already low. After it went even lower.
Oh, so yeah, people were really disapproving not only because of the prime minister not being ideal, but also because they didn't want COVID to happen
yes.
while they were having the Olympics, basically.
Yeah.
I see.
I mean, it also went negative because like fans couldn't see the games as well, right?
True. Yeah, there was 60 local sponsors. They pulled in 3 billion USD to be tied to the Olympics. Now that the political ratings has dropped, even Toyota, which was like a long-time IOC sponsor, even they pushed out from TV advertising and Olympics associations.
And a
Because
Japanese
of the
company,
Prime Minister.
I guess it really was that bad. That behind the scenes, it was even worse than you can possibly imagine because of the political stuff.
Speaking of behind the scenes, that's not just the previous one. That guy wasn't just the only one making sexist comments. There was the opening ceremony director. He resigned because of Holocaust comments.
Holocaust comments.
Yes. He made Holocaust jokes apparently. The Japanese people, they're a fairly homogeneous people, right? So
yeah,
I think another dimension that can add into this is that as global events keep on penetrating Japan, like this Olympics, might bring more social political awareness about race and sustainability and inclusion. I guess that's the only positive I can see from all these controversies.
Yeah, it's definitely both ways. It just brings a spotlight onto Japan, and I guess that suddenly all of these officials who maybe could have gotten away with it in their home country, suddenly with the global spotlight, it just doesn't really work that way. Yeah.
True.
So what's happening with the Tsukuna Kazu Takade right now?
The former
was
JOC
he-
leader.
the former.
What's his current state?
He's under investigation by French prosecutors, but he did resign. He did resign from his position, but he still maintains innocence. I guess there's more going on than we thought. He might be receiving some support from the Japanese government. It's all
mean,
politics.
Taking the fall, so they're probably
Yes.
protecting him.
Yep.
Yeah. But not the public. The public pretty much.
Yeah, the public probably doesn't like him that much.
Yeah.
Like, how do you guys think though? Like, these people, they hold such high positions. Like, why do they put, like deliberately, like make these like discriminatory, racist remarks on, let's say, for example, an athlete? Like, why do you think? Like, what is their incentive? What is their motive to sort of like do this? That's the only thing I question.
I don't know. They're just making a joke. I
Yeah,
guess
we
they
gotta
don't
make-
really realize it, or like it just shows who they really are, I guess. If they,
They're
if
like old-fashioned, you know.
yeah,
Yeah, true. So I
True,
guess
true.
most.
That's another. There's the historical movement of political correctness and political perspectives, which I'm not saying it's all bad, but there's a difference between what is accepted now and what was not accepted. You know.
Yeah, so I guess like like perception of different subjects of what people say, like it's very subjective, like it changes all the time. So yeah, I yeah that yeah that's how it is.
Speaking of subjects, what do you think about speaking of politics again? What do you guys think about athletes, expressing their political opinions on the Olympics? Because the Olympics is strictly, they have strict codes of political neutrality.
I mean, they do have the freedom to do that, but like, they're definitely gonna get
Ah, ah.
consequences.
Yeah, but I feel like like even though they're athletes, right? They have higher, I wouldn't say higher social status, right? But if you're let's say a highly performing athlete, you're basically a celebrity, right? Like famous
yeah,
Olympic participants, like Naomi Osaka, like many other people like Michael Phelps, like a lot of Olympians, like. But I actually think being an athlete, it's not a social status for you to sort of skyrocket up to a celebrity. Like being an athlete still considers you like you having a job. Like your job is to sort of hone your skills and to practice your skills to participate in the sporting event. So I believe like even though their popularity brings them up to such a high place, they should still retain like the basic rights like we have, like
True.
the freedom to actually like voice out their opinions on political through political movements, join movements and such like that. So yeah, I feel that athletes really have to hold this burden, of like the in especially representing themselves in the public eye. So yeah, I guess that's the really heavy burden athletes have to hold.
Yes,
yeah,
that's basically summarizes two opposing ends of this debate. On one hand, you have athletes as individuals who have obviously political rights, but on the other hand, they're athletes. They have responsibilities, and as Kimi said, they're basically celebrities at this point. Their words have an impact. If someone in a high position says sexist comments or political comments which might be controversial, like the Holocaust, there must be boundaries drawn. A certain example is Raven Saunders. She's a US silver medalist, and she came out to the podium with an X, raising her arms in an X. Shout out to all my Black people. Shout out to all my LGBTQ community. Shout out to everyone dealing with mental health. I mean, obviously, you can see this from a positive standpoint, but imagine someone saying those radical comments, which obviously are positive, but those radical comments just flipped it to the negative side. Obviously, it bears a lot of responsibility.
yeah. And I think those, it's just, is it really the right place and time? I mean, I know it's definitely, especially if you want to make a statement, the Olympics are probably the best place to do it. Not only are you already seen like you're a winner, you're on the podium, everybody likes you because you did good, and then everyone's watching you from all over the world. You're representing your country, you can say pretty much whatever you want to say. But is
Yes.
it logically, like, for the people who watch the Olympics for sports and who just want to have a good time, is it really the best place to put your political views?
Right,
What,
right.
what do you
This
guys think?
particular Tokyo Olympics, there was a lot of these cases coming up. Athletes such as Gwen Berry and Race Kimboden, they over the past, they've done similar demonstrations. So in this particular Olympics, the IOC actually ratified Rule 50, which is basically the part about political neutrality. They said athletes were allowed to speak up in news conferences on their social media accounts or protest on the field of play before a competition, but the medal podiums were still no place for political expression. So they kind of took like the middle ground. What do you think about that?
I would honestly agree with that. I think
That's a good rule. Yeah.
yeah, I think that's a good rule, because if it's on social media, it's like it's your fault for following them, for wanting to read what they say. But if it's on TV, on live TV, when they're at the podium, and then you just want to see them get a medal, and then they start going on about their political views. I mean, yeah, I don't really think that's the best time, at least in my opinion.
That sounds reasonable. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, like I believe there should be like, limits, restrictions put in place. Like athletes cannot go up to the podium and then like state their radical ideas. And same thing for fans, like just because your athlete says something you don't like or says something that opposes your view, I feel that you should still respect the athlete for he is also human too, he has his own views, his own perspective. So yeah, I think everyone should at least show some sense of mutual respect and decency to one another in terms of especially talking about their political views. Yeah.
And then you also said there was a petition that there is a stronger commitment to bring out these issues against social justice, racism, and inclusion. And so is there also this opposite side movement that actually wants to make the Tokyo Games a little bit more political, like to show more inclusion and to talk about this stuff? Is there also that side to it too?
Yeah, it's very interesting that you mentioned the other side of this resistance. It's like emancipatory movements, stuff like that. You can judge it for yourself whether it's appropriate for the Olympics or not. But otherwise, history moves just like that. Back then, women weren't allowed to participate, and then they started some emancipatory movement, and boom, they're permitted. You can rinse and repeat this for other social issues. So I guess it's up to you to decide whether what you see on television is appropriate or not. Because at the end, you are the individual, the subjective political individual.
Yeah, definitely. That's a good point though. Like, if you want to say that Olympics is nothing but a sporting event, that's not really true, because it also has been used to push social justice and rights. Like how you said, yeah, women began competing as well. They started opening up new events for people. So it's not only just a sporting event. There's definitely a political side to it, and yeah, it's up to interpretation whether you want to think of it as a social justice political event or just a basic sporting event. It's really up to you, I guess.
Yep. Right, so that concludes the end of this segment. We will go on to a short break. And we're back from the break. Kimi, would you like to head this new segment?
Yeah, sure. So, like, the 2021 Olympics, right? There's especially a lot, especially, on social media like TikTok, Instagram, you could see all these, biracial athletes, and these teenage athletes actually like standing up for the country and representing the country for the Olympics, And I feel like, with the like sort of the globalized dominance of these more and more younger kids and biracial athletes entering the Olympics, I think we're going to see a lot of these new biracial and teenage athletes entering the next few Olympics, So in fact, the 2021 Japanese Olympic team, right, was actually deemed one of the most diverse teams in the entire history of Olympics. Like I'm pretty sure they had more than like 3 dozen, which is about more than 30 athletes being biracial or mixed Japanese. So have you guys heard like the amazing stuff the biracial athletes did during the opening ceremony night? Like Naomi Osaka. Did you guys watch that?
I don't remember the opening ceremony. Yeah.
I don't watch the Olympics at all.
Did she light it up or something?
Okay, so I'll tell you guys.
I mean, it's good though. Like connecting with the previous point I made. Japan's a homogenous country, etc., etc. And I think biracial athletes is another example of globalization, which is it can bring positive progress to social awareness.
Yeah, so you actually, what happened on the opening night, right? Naomi Osaka. You guys know who Naomi Osaka is?
Yeah, tennis player.
Japanese American tennis player.
Female tennis.
Like I heard she's like the current champion of the U.S. Open, right?
Yes.
Yeah, and then so what she did basically, she had the honors of lighting the cauldron, and actually another biracial Japanese athlete, his name is Rui Hachimura. I'm sorry if I didn't pronounce his name correctly, but he's actually Japanese Benin's NBA player of the Washington Wizards. And so what he did was, I think I'm pretty sure he was the one carrying the Japanese flag during the opening performance of the Olympics. So yeah, other than this, I think.
Did he play for the Japanese team?
Yeah, of course he's.
Oh yeah, obviously.
Yeah, obviously. He's Japanese basketball player, man. Yeah.
And you said half from Benin, in Africa.
Yeah, his dad is African, his mom is Japanese, but he decided to take his mom's Japanese name, and because he basically grew up his entire life in Japan, and I'm pretty sure the US for college, and he played college basketball. So from there he was able to go to the NBA.
That's
Yeah.
nice.
So like, what do you guys think should be the official rules when you want to represent a country? Because you said he also went to America, right?
Yeah.
For college. So how far do you think you can go when you can still represent your country? Like how far away from your country, studying, being from half ethnically from somewhere else? Yeah, like how far do you think you can still represent your country?
Basically, I don't
understand.
place much emphasis on nation states. I think as long as you have an ID that says you're Japanese, I think they should be allowed to represent their country.
Yeah, like
If they're culturally distant from the nation, I don't think it's a problem. It's just a name anyway.
Yeah, but like
What
it's
matters is
legal.
the effort they put in.
yeah, like I believe like as long as you're like you're of Japanese nationality, you hold a Japanese passport. Yeah, of course you're able to actually participate and represent Japan as in the Olympic. But right now, I feel like the main problem, right, especially in sporting events, Olympic events, especially when you're representing a country, like many biracial athletes like remain to be the main target of discrimination, right? Like following what Chris said before, like Japan is like a largely homogeneous and they're very nationalistic. They're very nationalistic population, and like with this, I feel that a lot of Japanese, actually a lot of netizens online, they've actually pounded many biracial athletes and like blaming them for not being pure Japanese. And there's discriminatory term they actually use, saying that these biracial Japanese athletes are half full, which basically means you're half Japanese, half something else. But as I said before, Japanese being a very homogeneous, very nationalistic country, they believe that these biracial athletes should not represent Japan. So like it really raises the question, like, so what does it really mean to be Japanese, or like what does it really mean to be like any other nationality? So yeah, I guess that's the big problem, the big question that a lot of these biracial athletes experience.
I can see where Darren is coming from. Obviously, they might have some distance with the Japanese culture, but again, I find total fault on the Japanese netizens. I can see no problem with athletes representing their country, even if they're not culturally close with them. This is just a name. It's just a title in the end.
Yeah, that's what you're saying is very true. Like in fact, Rui Hachimura, he even though his dad is of African ethnicity, right, he lived his entire life in Japan and just decided to continue his basketball career like in America. So he actually, his first language is Japanese, and his actual main language is Japanese, and he in fact went to America actually to learn English while also pursuing his basketball career. So I feel that especially these ethnic African athletes are especially pounded just because of their skin color, which I think racism really plays a dominant role in especially these big sporting events like the Olympics. So yeah, I believe racial discrimination is still really dominant, especially now in the modern world.
Yeah.
Certainly, I take a more radical. Go ahead, Darren.
I was gonna say, like, in Japan, it seems that there's like a ton of backlash, but at the same time, I've been seeing, especially in more Western countries, that people who are pretty much fully of another country's descent, mainly African descent, who were just born and raised in America, they're really happy to represent the United States, even though being ethnically not American at all, but because they grew up there, I guess they're really happy to take them in. I guess comparing that to Japan, where they're just half. They're not even just like fully different. They're half Japanese. They grew up there. They speak the language. Like even Rui Hachimura has like his name is Japanese. It's not something completely different, and yet they still receive a lot of backlash from the Japanese. It might just be I'm not saying it's just a Japanese thing, but it might be the differences of cultures as well.
Personally, I take a more radical approach. This might be interesting, but I personally take a more radical approach than you guys. Even if the athlete does not speak a language, is part of the ethnic culture, or even has a different sounding name, I think they should still be allowed to represent their country. But the thing is, another dimension, the conflicting perspective of them is that cultures have a certain way of life, a culture which, if you take that away, if you say, oh, just about anyone can represent Japan, then obviously it poses a problem for the Japanese people, and the Japanese people should be able to pick who represents them. So, both of these sides, I think there should be an open, clear debate on what should be allowed, what shouldn't be allowed. Because personally, I take, the left stance, but there might be other people who won't. So open debate, I think, is the best solution going forward for biracial issues.
Yeah, like Chris, John, I mean, I feel like, like in Naomi Osaka's case, right? Actually how she came to representing Japan in tennis event and eventually the Olympics, she had to actually, like, before turning 22, right? This is a law or some sort of regulation in Japan, right? Like before turning 22, you have to decide on whether you're gonna give up your Japanese citizenship for, let's say, the American citizenship, or you take the Japanese citizenship and give up the American. So actually in Naomi's case, right, she had to decide, right? And with her wanting to be more immersed in Japanese culture, and because she lived most of her life in America, not knowing much about Japan, so she had to actually give up her American passport and in order to take in the Japanese citizenship. So like I want to know your perspective, your view on this. Like, and in fact, she's actually facing even more backlash for giving up her American passport with these Japanese people like pounding on her and saying that, okay, you should have gone back to America, you grew up there your entire life, you speak English, you don't even speak Japanese. Like, I want to know what you think about this.
Obviously, you can't go right ever with the Japanese public, but no, that's just a joke.
Japanese public.
That's just a joke.
Strangely racist.
But no. But obviously, again, I'm a hardline left-liner. I think the athlete can do whatever she wants, but I think the decision to give up her passport is also part of the debate, is part of the transparent debate, public space in which people can decide opinions on. So I think it's progress. At the same time, the Japanese public might be angry about it, but well, they can't stop it. They just need to sort out their differences, which I think is a good.
I think there's a slight difference between if it's just like some person who is half and decided to immerse themselves in Japanese culture and become a Japanese citizen. There's a difference between that and someone who's going out onto the world stage to represent your country. And I feel like that's where a lot of the uncertainty comes from, is because she's fully representing a country that a lot of people, I'm not sure how, like, if I agree with them, but a lot of people feel that she's really not a part of. So that's like, I think, where the real uncertainty lies.
Again, yeah, I agree. That's uncertainty should be resolved with transparently in the public space. So I think that's how I would go forward.
I heard she also got backlash for supporting the BLM movement in the US last year.
Yeah, she did. So, Japanese being really nationalistic, right? So, in her actually supporting the Black Lives Matter movement, many Japanese netizens, like, especially made fun of her, mocking her, saying, "Oh, why are you supporting this movement? I thought you want to be Japanese, like, I thought you even gave up your American citizenship. Why are you still advocating for this movement? Why are you still supporting the Black people? I thought you're supposed to, show some sort of nationalistic Japanese pride," something like that, So I guess it's really unfair to all these, especially big names out there, like especially Naomi Osaka, a rising star. She's really young, by the way. Basically a rising star, coming out, and she's already receiving this backlash. So I think it's really unfair, especially for these rising athletes and many athletes in general, like biracial especially. Yeah. So like I want to know what you guys think of, like, especially, like, put yourself in the shoes of these biracial athletes. Like, I know I'm the only sort of like mixed person here, right? But as for Darren, like I know you grew up in quite a lot of places in your lifetime, right?
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Yeah, so I want to know like your perspective, you know, having lived in so many places, like what do you think, like I who what would you I what like which group would you identify yourself with? Like are you Indonesian? Do you identify more of Americans? Like I want to know.
It's actually kind of similar to Naomi Osaka, where like I think it's 18 or 18 in Indonesia, where I will eventually have to choose, because right now it's legal to have both. They don't really mind, but until you become 18, you will have to choose, and I think I guess in America, they, like I said earlier, they're a little bit more open to having people of other ethnicities represent their country, um, and of course, I I am fully ethnically Indonesian. I mean Chinese, you could say, but I'm not I'm not white per se. But yeah, at least I look and ethnically I am from Asia, so I don't have the biggest struggles of being half and having to split that ethnically. But it is definitely a choice that I'm not really sure what I do, because I'm not, as of right now, I'm not representing my country in any global big event like the Olympics right now. But yeah, honestly, I really don't know how to answer that, because
Yeah.
it must be a really tough decision.
Yeah,
Definitely.
exactly. Like, yeah, I really like respect what these biracial athletes have to go through.
Darren, I have a question for you. Did you like, not to be offensive to you, but like, did you face like any like racism like when you were in America?
In America, I guess it wasn't flat out racism. There were definitely the Asian stereotypes going on, like the squinting eyes, the ching chong. And that was definitely there. But I think definitely in America, it's getting better. It's definitely better than it was before, and you kind of learn to be okay with it. But the main problem is that you never, in America at least, it's really hard to separate yourself from being Asian American or from being African American. I guess it happens to a lot of people in America who are not Caucasian, that it's hard to get away from that label. So I think definitely in like Japan, where they're doing it for the Olympics, it's even harder, because yeah, Japan is a very conservative country, and it's definitely a lot harder to get away from that stereotype, I guess.
Yeah, I think in the global sense, identity is complicated, but it would be more safe to say that you are more constitutive of what you are not than what you are. Well, again, I think it would be naive to think that everyone can somehow play along nice. Everyone has different ethnicities and different cultures that they're brought up with, like Aaron. So, yeah, again, back to public space, I think there should be transparency. That's what I think.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
And how they want to be represented, of course.
Yeah. So speaking of the public, right? Especially now, there's a lot of younger athletes actually entering the Olympics. Like especially now during COVID, I believe like with the 1 year gap of extra time for essentially these athletes to train. Like I believe with this, more and more athletes were able to actually feel more prepared for them to enter the Olympics. And with many of the Olympic events, not many, but some of the Olympic events having literally no age restriction, I feel that more and more younger people, more and more teenagers are actually entering the Olympics. Like we could actually see the prevalence of young energy evidently displayed in the 2021 Tokyo Olympics. Like I think it was athletes between 13 or even 10, no, not 10, I think 12 to 18. Like they literally dominated the sport, especially like including new sport. I think it was skateboarding. Yeah, skateboarding. And then there are a few teenage winners for swimming and gymnastics. So I want to know what you guys think, like the future. Like do you believe someone at the age of maybe 12, 11, like someone from Indonesia representing Indonesia, like at such a young age? Like, what do you guys think? Like, do you think it's even possible in the future?
There's definitely a possibility. It just depends on what the sport is, I think.
Yeah.
Because, like, for example, wrestling, you want to put an 8-year-old against a 20-year-old.
True, yeah. Exactly.
Yeah, but
I mean, it's a good thing, right? I don't think there's really anything too bad about someone who's young representing their country.
I'd like to bring up the point that the only comment I'd have is that we must see athletes also as a job, right? This is not just some little plaything that you go off to Japan and just play something. It's a job. So I think I keep on coming back to this phrase a lot, but they're obviously transparent public space in which you define that this is a job. There are working hours, and you gotta regulate that between the athletes and the government. I think that's important. Working hours, especially.
Wait,
yeah,
are you
Considering
talking
they're
about,
so
like,
young,
child
you know?
labor or something?
Yeah. I mean,
There
like,
might be, you never know. Yeah, so it's important, I think.
they're like also having more time to prepare, like during COVID,
yeah,
they have time to practice, they have time to grow out their talents.
yeah, true. But in response to you, Chong, like, you say that these kids actually have to commit themselves, blah blah blah. If they want to actually pursue this job as an athlete, like, I believe like as long as you have the passion, you have the resources, you have the time, and you actually want to pursue this in the future, knowing that you might meet obstacles of failure, like you still want to be, let's say for example, a swimmer. Like let's say your parents are very supportive, they're willing to pay all the fees, or they're willing to motivate you, give you sort of all the strength you need, in order to be an
Yeah,
athlete.
I agree. They should be allowed to go. Obviously, they're individuals. As in the individual sense, of course, they should be allowed to pursue this, but obviously there should also be clear regulations and stuff like that.
Yeah. So
I mean, there's like no better motivation to pursue your dreams than like competing at the Olympics, and some of them even won gold. Like at that age, you're winning gold at the Olympics. Like you already know that's good. That's what you're gonna do. That's what you should do.
Yeah, like, and even like furthermore, with our world being more globalized, with many people around the world being closer together, like I feel more and more kids are sort of exposed to these global events, especially Olympics. Like they actually know what's happening, like I believe like 5-6 years ago, technology wasn't as developed as right now. Like I believe as a kid I wouldn't have showed any interest in the Olympics at all, Yeah, so I guess now, especially now, the younger generation, like including us too, like we have a lot of opportunities, whether it be for learning new knowledge, seeing the world, even during COVID, and yeah, I feel that we as a younger generation have a lot of opportunities, So like I'm the only Singaporean here, right? and you, the other three of you are Indonesian citizens, right? So like as a young citizen, Indonesian citizen, like what do you believe like you can bring to your country, or sort of like how has the Olympics helped young Indonesians, especially young Indonesian athletes? Like how has that shaped like your guys' thinking, or maybe a large demographic of you or of your guys, like people in the same age group as you? Like what do you think they're gonna think of the future for Indonesia being represented in the Olympics?
I think honestly, Indonesia has like a lot of opportunities to win, especially in the Olympics. But like I feel they aren't maximizing their opportunities, and that's why like Indonesia has struggles in the Olympics, in some sports.
Yeah, like I feel,
I think there's a lot of potential, but it's just that it's not being brought up to the global stage. Because if you look at if you look at politicians, they basically take the winners, and if you can see slogans and billboards and Instagram posts, they're all parading the winners, but they're not actually sending the potential there. So yeah, it's a very selfish situation.
Yeah, so yeah, I feel like there's a lot of lost opportunity, lost potential for all these athletes. Like the thing is, they right now, especially geographically, right, Indonesia is a very split nation, like a very sectioned out nation. Like many thousands of islands. Right? So I think that I wouldn't say that's an issue, but it brings up more opportunities, you know, where these people from all around can actually connect with each other, especially all these Indonesian citizens can connect with each other, and you know, sort of generate a sense of closeness together, you know, like a stronger, I would say, nationalistic pride, you know. So, and in return, with this pride, with this motivation, like I think it sort of pushes these kids to work even harder and to work for their goals, to represent Indonesia someday, having big dreams of, you know, eventually entering the Olympics, right? Like I heard Indonesia won gold for what do you call badminton this year, right? And those who and the participants were actually quite young, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
I think one was in their 30s. The other one was in their young 20s.
Yeah, young 20s.
It was doubles, women's doubles.
Yeah.
Yeah.
On that, what do you guys think about Indonesia winning?
Let's go Indonesia. I mean, yeah, it's happy. It's good. It's definitely it's like the one thing that will bring everyone from around Indonesia all together. Everyone's celebrating for a win because it's a full country thing. You know, everyone's happy to be part of this, I guess.
I feel like Indonesia's history in the Olympics has not been like as well as other countries.
Yeah.
Definitely. Indonesia has only won like 8 gold medals after 28 years of joining the Olympics, and most of them are in badminton.
Yeah. So yeah, it's definitely no China, no America, but at least badminton is like a sport that Indonesia is kind of known for.
Yeah.
They're kind of up there, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, like, you know, like I remember, like, I was on Instagram, you know, like my explore page, or was it TikTok? I forgot. Like, you know, I don't usually watch like local Indonesian stuff. Like, I don't really see that on my recommended page, right? But you know, after like what 2-3 days after they won
won everything was
won,
about them.
everything. Yeah, like even my recommended page, right? Like it was like swarm with them, you know, like everything about them, you know. So
was
I
it
guess
even on the recommended page? Like people we follow post about them.
Yeah. So I feel like, you know, Indonesians really have Indonesia's sort of like a hidden treasure, you know, like almost no one knows about Indonesia. So I believe, you know, Indonesia should push for it and like go full speed, you know, to reach their maximum potential, you know, to like fulfill like their people, to make them happy, to represent their nation. Yeah.
I also feel like Indonesia's been underestimated by a lot of the countries in the world.
Yeah. That's very true.
I mean, yeah, think about it. Indonesia has the 4th largest population in the world. So we should have the 4th most amount of
gold medals in the world
if it worked like that. Yeah, and gold medals and all of that. So why? I guess Indonesia still isn't definitely. I think there were 36. I might be wrong on that. On the overall standings for the Tokyo Olympics, it's definitely not 4th. Yeah.
Like I think like some might say that Indonesia might be underperforming in bringing home medals in the Olympics, as you said, Indonesia is a very populated country when there's like a lot of other countries that have less population than Indonesia and still sitting at the top 10 with the most medals for the Olympics. What do you guys think about that?
Obviously, having a bigger population means more chance of talented athletes, but again, potential isn't being sent out at the global stage, so it's a shame.
It lacks the infrastructure. Like you can't really deny the fact that most of Indonesia's problems in the Olympics, or performance-wise in the Olympics, comes from the lack of infrastructure, the lack of really good training places, you know, compared to more developed countries as well.
Yeah, I also did some research on what you just said. Like Indonesia's national budget was 2.3 trillion rupiah for the Olympics, when it was like only 0.08% of the entire national budget. Like it isn't that much, and so like as Chris said, like they aren't showing their full potential. They aren't developing their citizens correctly to send them out into the Olympics. That's why I think we're lacking in that department.
Yeah, but I mean, like, you know, Indonesia being like many of its islands being less developed as from like comparably to Jakarta, like what do you think the Indonesian government can especially do to help, maximize the potential of these possibly future stars, future athletes?
I think mainly it's the infrastructure and how much, and training facilities. Like, although they built like the recent SEA Games, they built like the GBK, the stadiums and stuff. I don't think they're maintaining it as well. That's a problem in Indonesia that has usually paid scant attention to.
Personally, I think it's funding and social reform. Like funding, as like John said, to keep up the facilities and send athletes abroad, obviously. But as Kimi said, Indonesia has geographical challenges. So obviously there needs to be social programs too to bring those athletes in and train them and connect them in the first place for that potential to be sent outwards.
I think, but definitely with the growth of wins, the more support that the people give towards the Olympics and this national feeling of athletes, Indonesian athletes going out there, it's definitely going to help increase probably maybe even the spending that the government is willing to give for this, because if there is all of that space and all of that support, maybe they'll be more willing as it goes on.
Yeah, so I guess this Olympics, like Olympics 2021 Tokyo Olympics, right? Like it really showed us a lot of things, like gave us new experiences, gave the athletes themselves new experiences, and even as us like spectators from at home, in lying down in bed, like watching live streams through YouTube. Yeah, like I think it's really a new experience for all of us. There's like ups and downs, but I really think this year's Olympic was really fruitful in sorts.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I don't think we could have talked this long about the Rio 2016, because this one is just filled with many interesting things to talk about, really. Yeah, from COVID to politicians acting crazy, and Indonesia and its nationalism, biracial athletes, teenage athletes. It's really been quite extraordinary, even if there was its ups and downs. Yeah.
A very interesting conversation overall. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have for today. Thank you for listening, everyone. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye, guys. Thank you.
Did he say fortunately?